Forget all you know about podcasts. We welcome you to an experience uniquely different. Please join us for our coverage of all entertainment on the fringe of society. The candles are lit, the lights are down low. It is now time to welcome our host as he steps up to the pulpit. The sacrifice has been prepared for the midnight black mass.
Ghastly greetings, groovy ghoulies. Welcome to the Midnight Black Mass. It is I, the devil you know, the Reverend Dan Wilson, back for the attack like Don Dockin. Except I think I might have more hair. Welcome to the show. Got a big one for you tonight. Dragon Gate USA, Evolve, Combat Zone, at times Ring of Honor, High Spot Star. Caleb Konley is going to be on the show, the man known as the Midnight Sun. A hell of an athlete, hell of a competitor, and very popular with the ladies and not so much with the dudes, probably for the same reasons. And he's going to be on the show later tonight. Very excited to talk to him. He's had an interesting journey in his career. He's had a really unique opportunity to see the world, and he's a guy that's capitalized on the things that have come in front of him, and another guy who's out here just burning up the independent scene. And that's really what we're going for here on this volume of the Midnight Black Mass, Volume 5, focusing on the movers and the shakers in professional wrestling, both on the indies and maybe otherwise. We'll see what happens down the line. I'm certainly not limiting myself to the indies. I've got friends in other organizations. However, there sometimes is a little bit of red tape that goes with dealing with large corporations. So I can't just call up my buddy John Doe and say, hey man, can you come on the show? And he'd say okay, because he might have a contract that prevents him from doing that. So I got to go through their people, and you get people and other people involved. And sometimes it's for the best, sometimes it isn't. But like I said, we'll keep working towards that to bring you the best program that we can. Big weekend for wrestling. Saw here in the South, we had Anarchy Wrestling's Hostile Environment. Congratulations are in order to them. Heard they had a hell of a card there with a violent main event in the Anarchy Rules format that only that building can produce. So guys like Iceberg and Michael Judas and Jeter and Deadly Sin 7. It was sure to be a Donnybrook. And from all indications, it was. Larry Goodman had a great report over at the GeorgiaWrestlingHistory.com website. That's about to actually go by the wayside, and it'll only be their blog at gwhnews.blogspot.com. Sad to see him go. GeorgiaWrestlingHistory.com was at one time the home of the Midnight Black Mass, and we aired several episodes there. We're there for about a year. They treated us real well. Rich Tate's a fine gentleman. Said he's got a new opportunity on the horizon that's going to limit his time working on the website. So as opposed to do it half-assed, he's just not going to do it at all, and I respect that. So, sayonara to GeorgiaWrestlingHistory.com. Big ups to Larry Goodman for staying on it. It's very important. These guys, I think a lot of wrestlers kind of limit how important journalists can be. Now, there's a fine line between journalism and just someone spewing editorial opinions. In the case of a guy like Larry Goodman, you're not going to find a more accurate reviewer in all of independent wrestling. In my opinion, I'm surprised really that he never got hooked up with Meltzer or one of the other big websites, because he certainly is, as far as Southern wrestling goes, the most respected journalist out there. He always gives everybody a fair shake, and he's never afraid to call you on the bad, and he's never afraid to praise the good, and what more can you want? I mean, we've all had our chops busted by Goodman at one point or another. I've been fortunate, because I am an excellent performer, to fucking get many great reviews from Larry Goodman. But every now and again, you have a shitty night. And sometimes, unfortunately, that same shitty night occurs when Mr. Goodman or another such journalist is in the crowd. And so, on these independent shows that you normally might not hear about. If you had a bad night, then you're busted. But hey, I mean, imagine what WWE guys have to do, like 365 days a year on TV. I mean, not that much, but they're working hundreds of dates a year, and they've got cameras up in their face all the time. So hey, I can sympathize with that. But no, seriously, all the best to GeorgiaWrestlingHistory.com. Heard good things also with that Southeastern Wrestling in Knoxville. Looks like they're making some waves and putting some real solid quality independent wrestling back in the South. Knoxville's been a prime territory for that for years. I know NWA Smoky Mountain runs around that region. They got a pretty good reputation too. So good to see wrestling's kind of being revived up there in East Tennessee. It's been sorely missed for a while. Big events coming up for the Rev this weekend. Crazy from the Heat 2014 at Empire Wrestling in Rossville, Georgia. That's at 22 Austin Avenue. You can find out more about them at facebook.com/Empire Wrestling, or you can follow them on Twitter at EmpirePW. Huge card for Crazy from the Heat. Main event, Empire Heavyweight Championship. The Temptation Sean Tempers, going into his 8th month as champion, will be defending the title against the 7-figure deal Ace Rockwell, his most bitter rival, developing a 9-year-long feud off and on that has lasted the majority of their careers. It's interesting, they started out as a tag team, but now marks a time that they've been feuding longer than they were together. And it's all about the championship. It's all about the respect. Tempers has stated he's going to embarrass Rockwell, try to run him out of town, because this is the area. Empire's based out of the Chattanooga general area, and that's where Rockwell and Tempers started. A lot of history. It's all coming full circle. You'll want to be there at the Empire Arena at 22 Austin Avenue, Saturday night, August 2nd. Crazy from the Heat. That's not all. Tag team titles. 4-way ladder match for the top teams in Empire. Going to compete in a ladder match for the tag team titles. Going to be amazing. First blood match, brother versus brother, a family feud that has ripped the Lynch family apart. You're going to see Matt Fortune, the freaking star, as he calls himself, going to be taking on his brother Joey Lynch, former Empire Junior Heavyweight Champion, one of the most popular stars at Empire Wrestling. I'm going to be returning to the broadcast booth. So, hey, fans of the Midnight Black Mass, another reason to check out the program. This will be a historic night for me. This will be the first time I have gone back to a full-time commentary position in several years. It's a position I'm very respected at, and I appreciate all the kind words that people have given me over the years. It's not try to sound like I got a big head. I mean, I'm just repeating other people's sentiments. I'm my biggest critic. I think, I always have more work to do, but I'm very excited to get back in the booth and call some old-fashioned play-by-play with Empire Wrestling. And also, rumor has it that I might be hosting another live Midnight Black Mass at Crazy from the Heat as well. So you definitely want to be there. A whole slew of other matches. Junior title on the line. Johnny Viper's going to defend against Bane Lynch. We've got a grudge match with Logan Alvey teaming up with a returning Cyrus the Destroyer against the new stable of Ben Thrasher, Bobby Hayes, and Rush. It's really going to be a night to remember, and I can't wait for Empire Wrestling Crazy from the Heat. And I'll return to Empire on August the 16th. And apparently there's a big announcement coming for a major event in Chattanooga for Empire on August 23rd. You can also catch me at Dragon Con in Atlanta, Georgia, at the Hyatt Regency on Friday, August the 29th. I'll be appearing for Dragon Con Championship Wrestling. Always there. Typically manage Azrael and Slim J there as the annual reigning champions of something. And it's always crazy. There's Lucky Charms, there's naked women, there's stormtroopers, there's Jabba the Hutts, there's Captain Kirk's, and there's a lot of celebrities, and it's this wild, unique event. It's going to cost you about $50 for a one-day pass. You can get the weekend passes for around $150, and but it's well worth the cost if you're into sci-fi, geek, nerd, comic, horror, any sort of niche culture, which is what we specialize here in on the Midnight Black Mass. So definitely check out Dragon Con. You can follow them on Twitter at DragonCon, or go to their website at dragoncon.org. And on August 31st, I will be returning to Deep Southern Championship Wrestling and a co-promoted card with Pro Wrestling Chattanooga on August 31st in Red Bank, Tennessee at the TWE Arena, when with me in tow will be one of my favorite Devil's Rejects, the Strong Style Psycho Tank. And we can't wait to unleash the carnage of the rejects as only we can do in Red Bank, Tennessee on Sunday, August the 31st. Afternoon show, special 3 p.m. bell time. So definitely make your plans to be there if you're in the Southeast Tennessee area. All right. Plugs out of the way. Only other thing I'll tell you is go to Dragons Rejects on Twitter if you want to follow me. You can hear my regular opinions on things. I'm never shy to share what I think. Sometimes it's about wrestling. Sometimes it's about other things that I'm into, but you can definitely check it out. Now it's time for the Revs Rant. One of my favorite parts of the show. Didn't have one last week, and I don't always have to have a bad week to have a rant. I just think that it's more fun that way. But last week, didn't have a Revs Rant. Went to see Kiss. Talked about that instead. And a little scary horror news for you. This week, Revs Rant, going to briefly touch on the recent news regarding the closing down of TNA Wrestling. Very unfortunate. I think this is where a lot of guys of the current generation lose a little bit of the candor, possibly, that may be required in a situation like this. Here's what I mean. Okay, this is a place that employs a lot of your brothers. There's really no reason to take sides, whether you love the product, whether you hate the product. If you're thinking like a businessman, everything must be looked at as a potential opportunity. So as someone in the wrestling industry, it is really not smart to go out and just wish for a company's demise. I don't understand it. It makes no sense to me. I understand trying to look cool in front of your buddies, but again, this goes back to what I talked about on the show 2 weeks ago about thinking like someone who is generating the revenue and not like someone who is spending their money to be entertained. And so, in this case, I think the guys maybe failed to understand that wrestling is one giant ecosystem. It feeds itself. It is a food chain in and of itself. So if there's success at those high levels, like with TNA at Spike TV, or even higher with the WWE, then we here on the independents, whether or not we ever obtain those opportunities, are going to reap the benefits. So you need to be positive and hope they succeed. I mean, maybe if there's issues with management, maybe hope that gets sorted out, but they need to be around. They need to be around for the sake of the business, because it does leave a giant void, a gaping hole in the professional wrestling industry, and we're back to one place and one place alone that you can make a living wage and make the big money. And I'm not sliding Ring of Honor, but I have no idea what their contract situation is. I'm sure a lot of those guys are making livings, and that's great. So you do still have them, but we know they're a smaller operation, so they're not paying out the money a company like Panda Energy has, or Spike TV behind them, or a company like the WWE, who's a $1 billion Fortune 500 company. You know that a small company like Ring of Honor is not paying out that type of money. So it leads me to believe if TNA goes away, there is only the one alternative, and WWE, they are the stewards of wrestling history. They are the kings of the mountain. They have succeeded through blood, sweat, and tears, and by sometimes, just being a better product. They've managed to survive all these years and conquer wrestling, so it's really hard to state that it's just a bad thing when there's no competition, and I don't think you have to have me to be the one to tell you that. There's plenty of people with a lot more experience, made a lot more money in this industry than I have, that are saying the same thing. So just try to understand and appreciate how the wrestling industry is one ecosystem, as I said, as it feeds unto itself and sustains itself in that respect. Making any sense? You understand what I'm saying? Is it getting through to your brain cells? Well, I hope so. I do have a little bit of supernatural news, too, that I saw this story and I had to share it, and we're going to a break after this, and we'll be back with our guest, Caleb Konley. But so check this out. This is awesome. And ultimately, I'll go ahead and give you a spoiler alert to ruin my own punchline. Ultimately, no supernatural activity involved at all, but here's what happened. In a small Southern California town, it's a picket fence, white suburb type town, everybody's driving a fucking hybrid and All their lawns are perfectly trimmed, and all the houses look the same, little boxes made of ticky-tacky. Um, so, on this small Southern California suburb, porcelain dolls start appearing on the lawns of the residents. Strange, true, right? One thing even a little bit weirder about it, the dolls were made to look like and were dressed like the children that lived in the homes. As you can imagine, the parents were a little bit spooked. Wake up in the morning, no notice, no knock, no warning. You just look out in the yard and you see a doll that looks exactly like your kid. Yeah, I think I might be calling the police. And apparently that's what these families did. And as a result, there was a major investigation launched. Lots of resources and time were spent. And in the end, it was come to find out that there was an old lady, just a sweet old lady who lived in the neighborhood, that decided it would be an adorable gesture to make porcelain dolls that looked like the children of the residents and give them to them as surprise gifts, leaving them on their lawns overnight. And so, all a big misunderstanding, but it is a kind gesture. I mean, old folks, maybe they're not always hip with the times, and I'm in my 30s now, so I'm starting to see mortality up in the decades to come, and I can understand you start to lose touch with things, and I'm already feeling that at a young age, so I can imagine it's going to happen when I get older, but maybe you want to warn them next time. Just a thought. We'll be back with more Midnight Black Mass. Our guest, the Midnight Sun, Caleb Konley, going to be with us. Don't go anywhere. You are listening to the Midnight Black Mass exclusively via the Potty Humor Network at youtube.com/pottyhumor, also facebook.com/pottyhumor, that's PODDY, like the podcast, not like pissing your pants, and the Beyond Ringside Radio Network at beyondringside.com, as well as on Facebook at Beyond Ringside, and on Twitter at Beyond Ringside. We hope you're enjoying this fine program. Head over to the Potty Humor Network and check out some of our other podcasts like Get Your Pulls, the weekly comic book review, Last Acts and Zeros, the movie review podcast, as well as the Wolf Tickets MMA podcast. Also, Beyond Ringside runs 24/7 programming on their website, currently in rotation, the Midnight Black Mass, Beyond Ringside Live, Wrestle Rage, To Be Determined, the Saturday Showcase, and Cause and Effect. All of those running on the 24-hour BeyondRingside.com radio network. New episodes appear weekly on each of those broadcasts, so please be sure to join us. Our guest next week here on the program will be the last surviving protege of the Nightmare Ted Allen, the one and only Future Legend Award winner from the vaunted Cauliflower Alley Club, Mr. Kyle Matthews, will be here on the Midnight Black Mass next week. We'll be right back with our guest, the Midnight Sun, Caleb Konley, right after this.
Hi, but not too high. This is George Carlin. I'm sitting here. I have on a yellow hat, a pink shirt, dark sunglasses, and an earring in my ear. And I'm going to tell you not to get into heavy drugs. Well, it sounds bizarre, I know, but there are other things to do with your life, other things to help you make it. Heavy drugs make it all worse, and they help you die.
And we're back on the Midnight Black Mass. And at this time on the line, I have our very special guest this week, a man you can see on August 8th, 9th, and 10th in Orlando, Ybor City, and Jacksonville, Florida for the Evolve Wrestling Triple Shot. And will culminate with a huge match for him as he faces Chris Hero on Sunday, August the 10th. Ladies and gentlemen, the Midnight Sun, Caleb Konley, is live on the Midnight Black Mass.
What's going on, guys? Damn, I thought I was going to have to come and plug stuff, and then you already did it for me. I don't know what I'm going to do now.
I did your job for you. See, I make it easy. That's what happens when you get interviewed by a guy who's used to just pitching shit. So. But man, it's great to talk to you. I've known you for several years. We go back to when you started back in Georgia, and we're definitely going to talk about that. You've come a long way. How's life?
Life is good, man. I set out with a goal to do what I want to do in the wrestling world, and I'm steadily on that path as we speak, man. Like you just said, I'm doing Evolve next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. As we effing huge. Can't wait for that. Just killing time. Just trying to get to the big show.
That's all you can do, man. Just to take it a piece at a time, and you seem to be doing just that. I mean, that's a huge weekend event that you've got with all the top indie talent in the country. Definitely going to be able to show your skills off there. You're doing a lot of different things, both involved in wrestling. I've seen you've got some other media ventures that you're involved in as well. We're going to talk about them, but let's wind down the clock a little, or wind back the clock, should I say, just a little bit. Back to, I guess we met probably, what do you say, it was around 2004, 2005, something like that? When did you start?
I started spring-ish 2005.
Okay. And now, were you trained by Murder One also?
A lot of it was. I started with my dad, Notorious D.O.G. I did some stuff with Rob Adonis, with his UCW stuff that was running at the time, and then a lot with Murder One in the side yard of Matt's house.
I totally forgot that your dad was a wrestler. Like that's one fact that slipped my mind. I remember it now that you mention it, but that had totally blew past me. So what was it like growing up? The son of a guy in the business, and I guess it put you on the path to where you are. But did you get to see like both the positives and negatives? I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, my dad was kind of in the same place that I am right now, and I was in elementary, middle school, and we would go to Nashville to the NWA tapings at the fairgrounds, or we would go to where was it, Lawrenceville. It was the first Friday of every month, and just went to all these little wrestling shows, and I got to see all the guys. I remember David Young wearing cut-off jeans that had a mullet, and all these dudes that have made some money now, and I just kind of always was like, yeah, this is kind of what I want to do.
Wrestling is unique in that respect. If it hits you at the right time when you're a kid, it can capture you like nothing else, because it's like this weird blend of like superhero comic books and like real sports, and it takes everything that a kid around 7, 8, 9, 10 years old would love. Once I started going on the road with some of my dad's shows, I mean, that was basically all that I would go to school and I'd draw what my tights would look like, and I'd have 15 different names and 15 different gimmicks, and just every week it was something new, and it was just like wrestling basically consumed my life until I started getting girlfriends in high school, pretty much. We all take that break. If you grow up in wrestling or just attached to it, there's always that point where you discover pussy that you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
But then you come back to it, because then you find out you can get even more of it in wrestling. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, there's that.
Always one of the fringe benefits of the job. So like as a kid, did you have a favorite, like a guy that you were just like, that's my dude, that's who I want to be like, or that's who's influencing me?
I went through phases. Like as a little kid, I was huge into Sting and the Road Warriors. Basically anybody that had a painted face, I was going to be that dude. And then, I got a little bit older, and it was kind of Brian Pillman, and then I went through like everybody that's my size, like the mid-'90s cruiserweight WCW. That was huge for me.
Yeah,
any
those
of
guys
those
influenced the whole generation of dudes, the mid-'90s WCW cruiserweights. I think just about every star in the business would list like Benoit or Guerrero or Malenko as an influence in 2014.
It's basically molded wrestling the way it is today, I think.
Yeah, I would not disagree with that at all. So you got in, you trained with your dad, you trained a little with Murder One, who had a good pedigree of training guys. Of course, you had guys like Jimmy Rave and Iceberg coming from him. And then also, at about that time, you hooked up with Bobby Hill, who we knew at the time now, the hit-for-hire Bobby Moore, is making his own name pretty well in the Indies. So
we kind of went to high school together.
Oh.
I grew up in Georgia for the most part. There was, my dad moved to Florida for a little bit, and then I came back to Georgia like a little ways into my freshman year. And the first freaking day of high school going back in Georgia, I had to sit on a bus, and no one would let me sit down except this fat-ass fucking 350-pound metalhead fucking named Josh Moore. And then I didn't ever speak to him for probably a solid year went by, and I never said a word to this dude again. And I think he dropped out by that point because he's a piece of shit. And then all of a sudden, we were hanging out in the same circle, and then he was like, "Hey, my dad used to wrestle too." So we just instantly became buddies because both of our dads were fucking indie workers.
That's amazing. He's been around, and I'm really proud of Bob. He's really there was a while he was just kind of trudging along, but he actually started learning his craft and figuring out what worked for him and what didn't. What works for a guy like him ain't going to be what works for a guy like you. But not all indie wrestlers get that.
I think being around me and being around some of the guys he was around, like Kyle Matthews and guys that were pretty technically sound, he wanted to be like the technically sound dudes like we were being, and that's not his thing. I think he's worked his way into figuring out what fit works for him, exactly like you said, and I think it's helped him out a lot.
Yeah, I'm happy to see that. So that's a good segue into the story that I want to tell on here. That I know and it's what it is.
I know exactly what it is.
It's not the first time I had met you, but it is the first time I spent any reasonable time around you. You came in, you're a masked guy, you're the Black Pegasus, and I remember seeing you in the locker room and thinking, why the hell is this pretty kid wearing a fucking mask? But that was beside the point.
That's Murder One, man. That's Murder One.
But, it was I guess, a Chris Benoit type influence thing where he did Wild Pegasus in Japan under the mask. I imagine that's where it came from. But we did a show up in Saudi Daisy, which was my hometown, and so I lived 5 minutes from the arena, and you guys were on it, and so we had a big party back at my house afterwards, and it was Jeff G. Bailey and White Trash. Delirious and Daisy Hayes were there, and Rain Man, Corey Chavis. Just pretty much everybody that was on that show just came back to the house. And Jeff G. Bailey and White Trash instigated you and Bobby in a drinking contest. Now,
the Green Guy Challenge.
That's right. That's my perspective up to this point. Now, as a green guy, not really knowing any of these guys, but I guess you had some familiarity with the wrestling business still. What was going through your mind at this point?
I knew, I expected some hazing, and Murder would fuck with us a little bit, but nothing was ever too bad. And drinking a couple of beers was the least of my worries. Now I don't really drink beer. Now I like to drink a little bit, but I fucking hate beer. So the fact that I was having to drink beer sucked. The only thing I knew was I was going to win this goddamn Green Guy Challenge.
And the Green Guy Challenge continued, and you guys, you must have went through a case in that challenge. I didn't count the beers, but there were a lot.
I think the rules were who got to 12 first, and then all of a sudden, I think we were neck and neck, and I think he was 11 and I was at 12, and then they just wanted all of a sudden somebody, probably Jeff G. Bailey, shotgunned me one, fucking stabbed the hole in and said, suck it down. And then the 13th one put me over the top. And, I don't remember, I remember throwing up all over the fucking place, in the grass, in the sink, everywhere else in the world. And then that was basically, I don't remember anything else. That was done.
It's really hilarious.
From there.
Yeah. Well, the sink is the one I remember because, of course, I was married to my now ex-wife at the time, who's a fucking cunt. And, the fucking sink, you destroyed it. It never worked again after you yacked at it. And she was over the moon fucking pissed off about that. But, in the end, it ended up, it makes me laugh and endears you to me even more. So it's one of those things where I was like, man, this fucking kid, he puked in my fucking sink. And then, years later, I'm like, oh, Caleb, he puked in my sink. You remember that time?
Yeah, I think I had heat with a couple guys for a long time over that.
Yeah, it was a little dicey. I think other people were more mad about it than I was, but like I said, I had to fucking deal with shit for my old lady, so it didn't make me any fucking happier to do that. But down the line, it was okay. But yeah, that was just a crazy introduction, and then later we started working together a lot more regularly when I was booking for Roger Cantrell and GWP, and there's probably a book that can be written about the insanity that went on there, and not always in a good way. But that's when you started doing the male model gimmick. So where did that come from, and how did you evolve that into what you're doing now?
The male model thing kind of started as a joke for Murder as well. As actually Murder and Simon Sermon were fucking with me about it. And then I just kind of ran with it. I was toying with this name, Caleb Konley. It's my middle name and my mom's maiden name. And I was wanting to lose the mask, and I thought this name would be good. And then Simon kind of brought up that it kind of sounded like Calvin Klein, and then, I think at one show, he was a joke, bought me some Calvin Klein underwear and just, put it on my back. And I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to rock this. So I got some underwear trunks made, and I, started doing that. That was
a good gimmick.
That's pretty much it.
It was a good gimmick. It definitely brought Rick Martel to mind, and some of the other guys that have done that over the years in various territories. When done well, it's always a heat seeker. But as you're now the Midnight Sun, so where did that come from? Is that a comic book reference? I'm thinking, but maybe I'm not right.
It is kind of, I don't think I really have a gimmick anymore. But it started out actually when I went back to Rampage. The Midnight Sun started because the Twilight movies were popular. And Nick Patrick was booking Rampage at the time, and he decided that he wanted me to do a vampire gimmick. He wanted me to, basically be Twilight. And just like the underwear model gimmick, I was not, it wasn't exactly my favorite thing in the world to think that I was going to be a Twilight vampire, because that, it's not exactly my style. But, and then, I started talking to Jimmy Rave about it, and he was telling me, he's like, when I went to TNA and they weren't really doing shit with me, and they're going to put me in the Rock and Rave infection, and I was like, well, this really isn't me. And then he told me, how good it was for him, as far as, just character development to get out of his, comfort zone and try something new. So then I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to do this. And I got T-shirts made, and I had fangs that I bought, and I was like, they were telling me that, Dr. Gayton was going to give me some contacts to wear, and I had this whole idea to do this fucking gimmick to be a vampire. And then, I showed up with T-shirts made, and they're like, well, they kind of decided we're going to scrap the whole vampire thing. But I had gear and shit done, so I was like, well, I'm just going to call myself the Midnight Sun, be a little darker than the whole underwear model deal was.
That's cool. I know the reason I asked if it was a comic book thing is there was a giant gimmick back in the 90s that Marvel decided that if they put Wolverine, Ghost Rider, or the Punisher on anything, it would sell. So they came up with this ad hoc stable and called them the Midnight Suns, and they put that on fucking every book to try to get it to sell just on the cover, and I didn't know if there was a correlation, but I guess not.
I figured that out afterwards. Some comic book geeks told me about that, and I tried to toy with that a little bit, but I don't know. The vampire wasn't really meant to be.
Yeah, it's really not your style. You're more of a party boy. The vampire thing, I don't see it.
Hey man, Twilight was hot. He was just trying to cash in on the movie deal.
Hey, I don't blame him. Got to make your money where you can. So, you know, what I respect about you a lot is that you were a guy that had a big opportunity to take a chance put in front of him, and you took it. Not a lot of guys do that. I often find myself kicking my own self in the ass for opportunities that I didn't take. But, you know, a few years into your run in Georgia, I was booking at NWA Anarchy, I remember, because you had to tell me you were finishing up when we were just getting started with a little deal. But you got this opportunity at High Spots to go work up there. You left Georgia, you moved up to North Carolina, and clearly it was the right move. So, like, how did that come about? And, I just want to say also, I've seen guys get that opportunity, other people we know, and, you know, it not turn out so well, but you've fucking made more than the most out of it. Like, how did it all come to be?
High Spots was really, I'd been to the website before because I'm a fucking mark, and, like, that's where everyone, when they first start, gets their kick pads or their boots or whatever, and I didn't really know any of the guys, and then I actually met Jake Lanning. He was just randomly at an Anarchy show, and I had met a couple of the other guys just from other random shows that they were selling merch at in Georgia. They just happened to be at one of these shows, and then I was dating Daphne at the time, and she had done some stuff with them. And I had a job, it was a decent job. It wasn't the greatest job in the world, but I was 20 years old. It didn't really matter as long as I could wrestle on the weekends. And they happened to have two guys that were moving back to, like, one of them was moving to the Midwest, the other one was moving back to California, and they needed someone else to, you know, take over to start, like, pretty much right away. And I was like, well, fuck. I can get on shows in the Carolinas, and they're doing these other things in Virginia that are real well. I mean, this could be an awesome opportunity for me. So I just jumped on it, and honestly, yeah, it was a great thing. Like, at the time, like, the TNA house shows were ran by Hermie Sadler, and I got on a bunch of those, and I was like, fuck, man, I'm going to be a TNA soon. Of course, that didn't work out, but because of that, I've gotten to sell merchandise on huge shows all over the East Coast and New York and Boston and places that, like, if I was just, you know, driving around with Bobby and Murder in Georgia, I would have fucking never got on. So, like, I sold merch on some shows, and then I weaseled my way on to a couple shows, and I got over on some shows, and now I'm doing shows all over.
Well, just like the connections that you make out at those places have to be invaluable. Like, okay, you're going to fucking, you know, butt fucking headlock convention 37, and fucking you're selling merchandise and shit, but they got promoters from all over. They got fucking wrestlers and legends. You got opportunity to pick these guys' brains. You can network with promoters. And anybody be a fool not to make the most of it, but that's easier said than done, and you fucking did it. So, pat on the back to you, pal.
Thanks, man. High Spots it's honestly the greatest job I've ever had. Like, it's basically like being in a toy store all day, because fuck, that's what it is, really. I mean, it's still a job, but, you know, if you're going to have a job and you're going to be a wrestler, working at High Spots should be right up there on the list.
Yeah, and so I imagine that, you know, wrestling between that and your bookings pretty much is all of your income now.
Yeah, dude, it's not a bad gig.
No, that's great, man. That's all you can fucking hope for. It really, when you get in the business, I mean, everybody wants to make $1 million, but if you never make $1 million and you can pay your fucking light bill by putting on your drawers and fucking acting a fool, then that's a win-win. But so you do this. I wouldn't call it a podcast. It's more like a web series, I guess.
Web series,
Caleb put over the world. What is that about?
It's me and my buddy Zane Riley, who's another independent wrestler here in Charlotte. We're kind of just together, and we're fucking goofballs. He's kind of like my North Carolina Bobby, to be honest with you. Same kind of concept as we had when I lived in Georgia. He likes to drink. I like to drink protein shakes and fucking work out. And there's a little bit of a, you know, perfect strangers type, odd couple type mentality there, and we hang out, and we would just, we'd go to concerts or, shoot the shit on the road, and we'd say funny things, and people were like, man, you should film that. And like all of a sudden we were like, you know what, we should film it, and then we just started filming it. It's been pretty good. It's been pretty fun, It's a way to pass the time. It keeps me relevant. People see me every fucking week. Make
and
some
that
jokes.
Is at the High Spots YouTube page?
Yeah, it's at the High Spots YouTube page. We do it every Wednesday or Thursday. We're actually filming one tomorrow, so everyone go to the High Spots YouTube page.
And if you're a fan of 80s or early 90s sitcoms, I would highly recommend at least checking them out for the intro alone, because that
it's like 5 minutes. If you don't have 5 minutes to kill, then you're doing something right with your life. But chances are you're not. So just go over to the High Spots YouTube page and check out a couple episodes Zay and Caleb put over the world.
Yes, it'll take you much less time than it will for you to listen to this hour-long podcast. So
you don't even have to pay attention to it as much as you do this podcast.
That's right.
Matter of fact, I don't care if you actually watch it. Just click on it. Get my views up. Make my boss happy.
That's right. You can click on it a few times before it'll stop updating too, I think. So I've heard. I don't use that cheap ploy on my views. As you see, the view counts are not the greatest, but we're also on the Beyond Ringside Radio Network. So also I wanted to talk about $5 wrestling a little bit. You're involved in some sort of administrative capacity there, given that High Spots is. Did they put it on? Do they not?
Yeah. It's me and Jake Manning and basically the High Spots guys fucking around. I've been the commentator, ring announcer, referee, backstage interviewer, pretty much anything that needs to be done with $5 wrestling. I've done it. It's fucking hilarious. Again, if you're a fan of wrestling, maybe you were a fan of wrestling and you aren't so much anymore because it's kind of bullshit now sometimes, watch $5 wrestling. The biggest thing that I always get from $5 wrestling is wrestlers say, my girlfriend hates wrestling, but I put it in a $5 wrestling DVD and she fucking loved it. And I think that's a big compliment, because I think wrestling's the best when girls can actually appreciate it. Because otherwise, like, it's just basically a sausage party, and who the fuck wants that?
I mean, that's an old school tenet, man, an old school fucking preaching point is that, if you can draw the women, you're going to draw the men, and that's a fact. So, I mean, no matter how you get them there, if you get them, then you're going to get the dudes following right behind. But on the $5 wrestling, do you care to address any of, like, the controversy surrounding it? Because, there's a kind of a split camp. You and I talked a little bit about it on Twitter one time, and there's kind of a little bit of a split camp. But what do you think about the detractors of $5 wrestling, and what would you have to say to defend it?
Well, first off, a lot of the detractors I'll get into in a minute, but I have won them over, or Jake has won them over. People that weren't a fan of it, Colt Cabana has won them over. Okay, so we're taking bad wrestlers. There's bad wrestlers in every state. There is 5 million times as many bad wrestlers as there are good wrestlers. And it doesn't matter if you say that they're bad wrestlers and no one should book them, because there's someone that is going to fucking book them. Bad wrestling's not going to go away. There is some guard armory in some piece of shit town somewhere in the world that'll put on a terrible, terrible wrestling show every week. It's not going away. So what we did is we found a way to make it profitable and to make it funny. We took bad wrestlers that we would see on a regular basis. Now, these aren't guys, like, we didn't go on the street and, like, find some mentally challenged guy and say, hey, do you want us to make fun of you? Or put him in a ring and then just make fun of him. This is a dude who paid some guy $5,000 and to get trained and is wrestling every day, or, once a month, or whenever it is, who is wrestling with us or without us. We just gave people an opportunity to, like, have fun. And, like, Colt and Marty never say anything. So they don't go, hey, look at that fucking retard. Like, it's never like that. They just poke fun at things. Like, right now, I'm going to plug something else. Right now, we have 14 hours left on a Kickstarter campaign to send Freight Train to England. This is a dude who's been wrestling since the mid-'90s, and people have just kind of made fun of him behind his back. Now, people are making fun of him to his face, but he's got a T-shirt that sells 10 times as many as my T-shirts sell, and this motherfucker is going to England He's got a promoter in Australia that wants to send him to Australia. This guy's been all over the country. He was at fucking CZW Cage of Death last year wrestling Drag Excellence. Freight Train is over, and if there's anybody who says they're like $5 wrestling is just making fun of people, it's bullshit, because like this guy's a bona fide superstar.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing something outside the box, and I think initially that always rattles people. But when you explain it like that, it's hard to disagree that, you're right. I mean, this is not the 80s, the 70s, or the 60s. It's not even the 90s anymore. You can't go break these people's legs and run them out of the business. They're going to be there. So why not use it to your benefit and try to make some money in a business where every dollar counts? And I certainly can't blame you for that.
It's an bad wrestling's an epidemic, and some of the best wrestlers in the world are fucking broke, and they're crippled because they were great wrestlers and they had great wrestling matches. Dynamite Kid. But some of the fucking worst wrestlers are millionaires. John Cena, everyone knows, is a terrible athlete wrestler. His movements are weird, awkward. Hogan the same way, but they were entertaining. People have said for years how bad Hogan sucks, but the motherfucker is rich, and he's the most popular wrestler in history. Who's to say that with the right people behind him, the Freight Train can't do the same thing? Because he's entertaining as shit.
Yeah, I mean, working is a very subjective thing, and it's really at the end of the day, there's no quantifiable way to measure something that's an art form other than by ticket sales, because the sole purpose that wrestling exists is as a business and to sell tickets and make money. So no matter by what means you're doing that, if you're making money, you are successful by the only quantifiable definition you can put in wrestling.
Yep. and right now, the $5 DVD sales are good.
Yeah, that's excellent. What else do you have going on at High Spots that you'd like to plug, and maybe new releases or things that are coming up?
New releases. Speaking of great wrestlers, we are actually doing it this weekend at the NWA Fan Fest right here in Charlotte. It starts Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Legends Fest is going on. That in itself is a big thing, but High Spots is releasing Harley Race, the greatest wrestler on God's green earth documentary. He will be there signing autographs for it, and there'll be a whole big premiere and, very Hollywood-style-esque movie premiere with King Harley Race sitting there watching his documentary for the first time. So there's that. We have fucking PWG is kicking ass in DVD sales, and we've got new PWG DVDs coming out all the time. Here locally, PWX is stirring up stuff, Premier Wrestling Experience. We've got DVDs coming out for them all the time.
Keep hearing a lot about the PWX. I keep hearing a lot about the PWX. They're getting a lot of buzz. I had Corey Hollis on here a couple of weeks ago. He was talking a lot about them. That is also a Carolina-based promotion, correct?
Yes, it's kind of, it was funded by High Spots in the beginning. There's a new owner now. It's another one of those things that we sat around and talked about it for a while, and then we finally did it. And basically, guys like myself, guys in the South, guys like Corey Hollis, we wrestle a style that doesn't really fit in a lot of places in Southern wrestling. And I would go to Ring of Honor and do TV tapings back in the day, and they would always put me in a match with like one of the really big guys that just brawled, or they'd put me in a comedy type match, and it was because like, well, you're a Southern style wrestler, you don't really wrestle our way. And I'm like, well, yeah, I do. I can do that. I can do all of that kind of shit too. And we kind of got tired of having to drive to New Jersey and Philadelphia and New York to get booked on really good matches that people would take us seriously. So we decided, fuck it, we're gonna, there can be fast-paced wrestling in the South, and that's kind of what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it a little more hip, a little more fun. We run like bars and stuff in Charlotte and Winston-Salem, and try to make it a cool atmosphere for, younger adults who would watch PWG or watch Ring of Honor, watch that kind of wrestling. You bring it to the South. It can be done, and we're doing it.
Yeah, and I don't think that there's a misconception. People think that only thing that gets over in the South is grabbing a headlock and clapping and fucking sticking your finger in the heel's ass and fucking like all of your traditional Southern hoo-ha tropes. Where everything's a Three Stooges bit. And certainly, if you look at God, you look at Mid-South or you look at the fucking Mid-Atlantic in the 70s. Certainly was not that. You're talking about serious sport. And I think, honestly, not a bad direction to take it in. I think if the business can ever find that happy medium between what the Ring of Honors are doing and the overall, like the character side of it, but still keeping the in-ring to that level, I think that's when we're going to take the next step, if you understand.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think everyone is trying to go that direction. Seeing, like, I would say Evolve and Dragon Gate and Ring of Honor, not that they've toned down, but they've tried to make it more character-driven, but more wrestling-based, like it used to be. And you're right, like Mid-South, like the show was gritty. It wasn't hokey-pokey comedy stuff. Like, I don't really know where that comes from, but there's totally that mentality. Anytime I come up north, like, people always just think that it's all dick and fart jokes in the South. Like, to just do an arm drag and then, fucking fuck with the crowd for 15 minutes. But
I mean, Nashville, I guess, is where that comes from, because that's the only place I can recall that, like, every fucking show has 90% of that.
Yeah, I guess it's the old Memphis stuff, the old Nashville stuff, but there is some real wrestling going on in the South, and Anarchy's is the same way. Anarchy's doing it too. We're just trying to follow in the footsteps of some of those guys. The AJ Styles, all the good Wild Side shit. I mean, that was good stuff, and it was way ahead of its time.
Yeah, AJ is really a forefather of a lot of that stuff as well. I remember him and Jason Cross and calling their matches back in 2001, and that was even before Ring of Honor existed, and I had never seen anybody, I mean, Guerrero and guys included, doing some of the crazy shit they were doing, and it's really expanded to its own whole generation of guys who've now been influenced by that, and it's always great to keep pushing the envelope. I'm more of a fan of what you would consider like classic Southern wrestling, but like I say, I'd consider that like Mid-South and Mid-Atlantic, like great athletic competition, a little bit of blood and guts, a lot of heated rivalries and great promos. Like that's really what I'm a big fan of overall, is just like the total package. And I think that you guys are trying to do that, so hats off to you.
Doing what we can, man. Yeah, one step at a time.
Absolutely. Well, fans, you are listening to Caleb Konley here on the Midnight Black Mass. As I said, you can see him with Evolve Wrestling. The website is DragonGateUSA.tv.
DGUSA.tv.
Thank you. And you can follow Caleb on Twitter at Caleb Konley. And really, I think that's probably going to wrap it up. I just wanted to see if you had any more plugs or anything else that you wanted to get out of
more plugs.
Dates.
This weekend, actually, any fans listening in the Mid-Hudson area of New York, I'll be wrestling Evan Bourne and Brian Anthony for the NEW heavyweight title. Also on that show, the main event is the Hardy Boys versus the Young Bucks. So that's going to be epic crazy. Brodus Clay is also on that show. Actually, Kevin Steen, in one of his last independent performances, is taking on Jerry the King F. Lawler. So that's going to be an insane show.
Outstanding.
Yes.
Well, it's been great talking to you.
Saturday. It was good catching up, man, and I'm glad you're not pissed off about me puking in your sink when I was 19.
No, man, dude, I'm getting old. I just like, there's only a few people in wrestling I just hate now, and everything else I'm pretty much whatever. But no, I was over that by the time I started fucking booking you in Anarchy. I thought you had a lot of talent, and you were definitely headed in the right direction, and I'm glad to see that I was right. Also, just one other thing. I saw you were doing a little work in Combat Zone Wrestling. Do you have any upcoming dates there that you wanted to plug?
Combat Zone, when? August 23rd. August 23rd is Combat Zone. Yes. Voorhees, New Jersey, or czwippv.com. Combat Zone. Also, I think September 13th and the 27th. They're also running. Combat Zone, another place. Great place to work. They've got a diverse locker room that wrestles in basically any style you can think of. It's not just the blood and guts that it used to be. They've got straight cruiserweights, straight heavyweights. Basically, if you are a fan of any type of wrestling, there's at least going to be one match on that show catered to you.
Awesome. Yeah, I know that for years they had the reputation of being blood and guts and the ultra violent, and certainly they still do that. But from what I've seen, they really have a lot of diversity up and down the card. I mean, isn't that really where John Moxley or Dean Ambrose made his name on the Indies?
Yeah, that was Moxley's home. Sami Callihan as well, who's Solomon Crow now in NXT. So a lot of good guys come from there.
And so what are your ultimate goals as we wrap this up here? Like, where are you hoping to be in 5 years?
In 5 years, I want to be, counting as much money on a bed as possible. If that means I'm in WWE, that's great. If I'm in Japan or Mexico, or if I'm a super badass drug dealer, I just want to be counting a whole bunch of money on a bed.
Scrooge McDuck style. You just want to dive in that shit.
Yes, dive into it.
Awesome, man. Well, really great catching up. Fans, get out there and support Caleb Konley on the Indies. Very last thing, promoters that want to book you, do you have any contact that you want to throw out there?
CalebConley@yahoo.com is my email. Don't fucking fuck with me and send me a whole bunch of spam. If you want to book me, go ahead. Or my Twitter account. I'm always on my Twitter account, so message me there.
There you have it. Serious inquiries only, folks.
Yes.
Serious inquiries only. All right, man. Dude, take care of yourself. It was fantastic talking to you, and I hope to see you up out on the road sometime somewhere, man.
You too, buddy. See you, man.
Hey, have a good one. All right, fans. That was Caleb Konley, the Midnight Sun, here on the Midnight Black Mass. Appropriate. Great episode this week. Very glad to have Caleb. Great catching up with him. And we've got more show coming at you next week. That's right. As I mentioned during the break, it will be the last surviving trainee of the Nightmare Ted Allen, Kyle Matthews, the Color Alley the Cauliflower Alley Club Future Legends Award winner. Kyle Matthews will be on the show next week. Looking forward to it. Until next time, keep one foot in the gutter, one fist in the goal, and two horns in the air. This is the Reverend, and I'm out.
Thank you.